Welcome to the conversation at airsafe.com. I'm your host, Todd Curtis. On September 11th, 2020, I had a conversation on radio station CFMJ, Toronto, Canada, on the Jeff MacArthur Show, where we discussed passenger concerns about air travel during the COVID pandemic.
You're listening to Jeff MacArthur on Global News Radio 640 Toronto.
Well, the airline industry has certainly taken a big hit during the pandemic, and many are wondering just how are the airlines, how are they going to bounce back? Well, actually, some people believe that flying could actually be a better experience post-pandemic. Todd Curtis is an aviation expert. He's at airsafe.com, and he's on your radio right now here on Global News Radio 640 Toronto. Todd, good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks again for having me.
Well, appreciate you coming on. I understand you were just recently on a flight. What was your experience like?
Indeed, it was a surprisingly pleasant experience, and largely due to the fact that we planned ahead. My family and I, including my dog, we all traveled together. I was nervous about the experience because at the time, as now, the extent of the disease and how likely it was to get the disease was still up in the air. And I was somewhat reluctant to be in any sort of public place like an airport. So part of the planning was, how do I minimize my contact? I did my tickets online. I made sure I only had carry-on bags so I didn't have to check anything in. Even our pet was flying in the cabin, so the usual hassle of putting the pet underneath in the cargo hold, we escaped that. And we didn't plan on doing anything once we got to the airport. No bathroom, no food, no drink, no anything. And fortunately, at the time, the airline also had social distancing. Didn't have anyone sitting next to me. And the airplane was less than half full, so that nerve-wracking experience disappeared. And in general, with planning, even now, flying does not have to be as nerve-wracking as you may think.
Yeah, so you actually felt fairly comfortable. As you said, you had some anxiety, you were worried beforehand, but once you got there, a lot of that dissipated?
Absolutely. And again, some of the preparation, fortunately, in the U.S., I don't know what the situation in Canada was, they even lessened some of the security requirements. You could have an extra large bottle of hand sanitizer above the 100 milliliter level limit that usually is the case. So if you wanted to have your own personal protective equipment beyond a mask, you can bring gloves, you can bring wipes, you can bring extra hand sanitizer. And again, these are things which have a practical use. That is, it keeps the virus from infecting you, and also a psychological use. The fact that I have my own personal protective equipment, the fact that I made plans above and beyond my normal plans, and the fact that the airplane was socially distanced made the experience less risky and less nerve-wracking.
As we mentioned off the top, obviously the airline industry, they've been hammered hard by the pandemic, but some do see an opportunity for airlines and airports. Is this really an opportunity, Todd, do you think, for both airlines and airports to examine the way they've done business in the past, change some things, make some necessary changes, not only because of COVID or due to COVID, but maybe these are changes that really will make the experience for travelers better post-pandemic?
I think that the changes that are being promoted or at least planned for are necessary, if for no other reason. Airports and airlines have to attract passengers. Now, of course, cargo is largely unaffected by this, but a large part of the revenue is from passengers, especially at an airport. So anything that will allow them to say to the passengers, look, your frustrations you had in the past are not going to be there as much in the future, will be a good thing. Some of the changes have been brought about by individual actions. For example, there may be some people who before the pandemic might have felt comfortable going to the check-in counter and getting a paper boarding pass to go on board the aircraft. Now, they're going to be more inclined to actually embrace the technologies which are universal in that you can do, for most cases, your boarding pass and your check-in process completely online. And other changes will take some more thinking. It will take some more investment. For example, streamlining the security process so we don't have to go through the common frustration of having our bags gone through and having extra questions asked, etc. Anything they can do to change that, and of course they have an incentive to do that now, anything they can do to change that to reduce the amount of human contact with security, that'll be a good thing for several reasons.
Here's one thing I would love to see change, because this seems to happen to me every time I travel. Like if I need to get to gate 1, my plane lands at gate 54. And they're going to walk through the entire airport. Is that something that they could rethink? Because when I'm thinking about COVID, and of course we want to limit travel, if you will, throughout the airport and making sure that people remain physically distant, isn't that something that makes sense, not making travelers have to walk like halfway through the airport to get to their flight?
Well, it does make sense, and I think initially, in the first few months as things ramp up to normal, a thinking airline will say to themselves, let's reduce that kind of foot traffic in the airport, because frankly, there's much less demand, on the order of 50% or less demand than it was beforehand. On the other hand, there's not much you can do about physical airport terminals. What you see is what you're going to get for the next few years. So I'm afraid you may still have the, wear out some shoe leather once traffic gets back to normal.
Is there any chance that I don't have to show up for my flight 2 hours beforehand if we're streamlining the process? And again, we don't want people just milling about and gatherings, unnecessary gatherings inside an airport. Is that something that might get dropped?
Well, the need to get there ahead of time, again, that'll depend on the amount of traffic and the kind of procedures they have in place. I can tell you from my personal experience, the last time I went to the airport, there was hardly anyone there. Going through security was a breeze. But that's temporary. I think that once things return to normal, the average passenger will be more inclined to do the various things you do to make the process smoother. For example, don't have any check-in luggage. Avoiding that extra line means you don't have to get to the airport as early. Looking for situations where the airline has a more forward thinking process when it comes to processing. And again, the media will probably inform the public if certain airports or certain airlines are adapting better to what's going on. And I think that will also control how much traffic goes there. And this I recommend to everyone, even today, even if we have normal traffic. Use whatever resources you have to figure out what the traffic is like at your airport. The physical car and train and whatnot traffic getting there, as well as the estimated waiting times at the airport. If that information is available, use it and make your decisions accordingly.
Absolutely. And as the old saying goes, COVID has obviously been a problem for the airline industry, but where some people see problems, others see opportunities, and perhaps this is an opportunity for the industry and for airports to do a little better. Todd, really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks again for having me.
Todd Curtis, aviation safety expert. Find him at airsafe.com.
For more information on airline safety and security, please visit airsafe.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.